May 19, 1536. Tower of London. 8 a.m. A woman kneels on fresh straw. She's 35 years old. 3 years ago, she was the most powerful woman in England. Now, she adjusts her dress so the swordsman will have a clean angle at her neck. And Boleyn steadies herself. The crowd watches in silence. The French swordsman she specifically requested raises his blade. Not an axe, because axes require multiple blows. This will be quick. Merciful, even. She speaks her final words. Composed. Dignified. Then, in one motion, her head falls. The crowd gasps. Blood pools in the straw. But here's what they don't tell you. And Boleyn was innocent. Every charge against her, adultery, incest, treason, fabricated. Her execution wasn't justice. It was murder. State-sanctioned murder ordered by the man who once loved her. The man who tore apart an entire religion to marry her. Henry VIII. What you think you know about the Tudors is a carefully polished lie. The history books show you portraits of regal monarchs in jeweled clothing. They tell you about the golden age of Elizabeth, the Renaissance prince Henry VIII, the birth of the Church of England. They frame it as progress, evolution, the dawn of modern England. They're lying to you. This is throne of lies, and we don't deal in comfortable fairy tales. For 118 years, from 1485 to 1603, 5 Tudor monarchs held absolute power over England, and in those 118 years, they turned their kingdom into an abattoir, a slaughterhouse where torture was policy, where children were executed for their bloodline, where pregnant women burned alive for believing the wrong prayers. The Tower of London, that pretty tourist attraction where you take selfies? It was their personal killing floor. Today, you're going to learn what really happened when the Tudors ruled. Not the sanitized version from your textbooks. Not the romanticized fantasy from Netflix. The truth. The screaming, bleeding, bone-breaking truth that historians spent centuries trying to bury. By the time we're done, you'll understand something crucial. The word tyrant isn't strong enough. It doesn't come close. This is the story of how pain screamed beyond words. This is the Tudor reign of fear. And it starts long before Henry VIII ever swung his first axe. August 22nd, 1485. Bosworth Field. Henry Tudor stands over the corpse of King Richard III. He's just won the crown of England in battle. But here's the problem. His claim to that crown is barely legitimate. He's descended from an illegitimate line. His mother's claim comes through John of Gaunt's mistress, a bastard line that was explicitly barred from royal succession. Henry knows this. Everyone knows this. So he does what any man with a weak claim and a strong army does. He takes the crown anyway. He marries Elizabeth of York, uniting the warring houses of Lancaster and York. It looks like peace. It looks like the end of the Wars of the Roses. It's actually the beginning of something far worse. Because Henry Tudor isn't just paranoid. He's correct. There are people with better claims to his throne. Real heirs. Legitimate bloodlines. And they're everywhere. 2 years into his reign, a 10-year-old boy appears in Ireland. His name is Lambert Simnel, and he claims to be Edward, Earl of Warwick, the nephew of the dead King Richard III, the real heir to the throne. Thousands rally to his cause. An army forms. They invade England in 1487, marching on Henry's forces at the Battle of Stokefield. Henry crushes them. But here's where it gets interesting. Lambert Simnel wasn't who he claimed to be. He was a baker's son, coached by a priest to impersonate the Earl of Warwick. Puppet. A fake. Henry could have executed him. Instead, he does something calculated. He parades the boy through London, humiliates him publicly, then assigns him to work in the royal kitchens, turning royal eagles on spits. A living reminder to anyone thinking of rebellion. This is what happens when you challenge me. But Lambert Simnel was just the warm-up. In 1491, a young man appeared at the court of Burgundy. He's well-spoken, educated, and he claims to be Richard, Duke of York, one of the 2 princes who disappeared in the Tower of London under Richard III's reign. One of the most famous mysteries in English history. His name is Perkin Warbeck, and he's about to make Henry Tudor's life a living hell for the next 8 years. Warbeck isn't some peasant boy. He's trained. sophisticated. He knows details about the royal family that he shouldn't know. European monarchs believe him, or at least they pretend to. The King of France backs him. The Holy Roman Emperor backs him. The King of Scotland backs him and even marries him to a Scottish noblewoman. Henry can't sleep, can't trust anyone. Because here's the terrifying question. What if Perkin Warbeck is telling the truth? Warbeck attempts invasion after invasion. Scotland, Ireland, Cornwall. Each time he rallies support. Each time, Henry's grip on the throne feels more tenuous. For nearly a decade, this continues. Finally, in 1497, Henry's forces captured Warbeck after a failed landing in Cornwall. He's imprisoned in the Tower of London. And this is where Henry shows you exactly who he is. Warbeck is paraded through London, forced to read a confession that he's an impostor. The son of a Flemish official, not a prince. He's humiliated, broken, then locked away. But Henry isn't finished. In 1499, after Warbeck allegedly attempts to escape with another prisoner, Henry ordered his execution. Perkin Warbeck is hanged at Tyburn. He's 25 years old. Whether he was really an impostor or the genuine prince doesn't matter anymore. Dead men tell no tales. Dead men make no claims. The message is clear. Challenge the Tudor throne and you die. Even if you're innocent. Even if you're a child. Even if you're just unlucky enough to have royal blood. But executions alone don't build tyranny. You need infrastructure, systems, institutions that make terror routine. Henry VII understands this perfectly. In 1487, he established the Court of Star Chamber. Officially, it's meant to ensure fair justice for ordinary people against powerful nobles. That's the propaganda. The reality is far more efficient. The Star Chamber operates without a jury, without the common law protections that have existed for centuries. Judges are appointed by the king. Torture is permitted to extract confessions. There's no right to remain silent. No right to confront your accusers. You're guilty until proven innocent, and proving innocence is nearly impossible. The Star Chamber becomes Henry's personal weapon. Political enemies disappear into it. Nobles who speak against him find themselves charged with vague crimes. The trials are quick. The punishments are brutal. Fines that bankrupt entire families. Imprisonment without term. Executions. But Henry's genius isn't just in the courtroom. It's in the streets. He builds a network of informants across England. Neighbors spying on neighbors. Servants reporting on masters. A whisper in the wrong ear can destroy you. No one knows who's watching, who's listening, who's reporting back to the crown. Trust evaporates. Then there's the money. Henry doesn't just want obedience. He wants to bleed England dry. He revives old feudal obligations that haven't been enforced in generations. Suddenly, nobles owe massive fees for rights they thought they owned. He invents new taxes. He demands loans from wealthy subjects. Loans that are never repaid. Loans you cannot refuse without facing charges of treason. Sir William Capel, a wealthy London merchant, is forced to loan the king £2,000. That's roughly £1.5 million in today's money. He never sees it again. The Earl of Northumberland tries to collect taxes on Henry's behalf in Yorkshire. The people riot and tear him apart in the streets. Henry's response? He executes the riot leaders and collects the taxes anyway. England becomes a police state. Wealthy, yes. Stable, technically. But the stability comes from fear. From knowing that one wrong word, one suspicious connection, one unpaid tax could mean ruin. And then there's Edward, Earl of Warwick. The real one. Remember Lambert Simnel, the fake Warwick? While that boy was turning spits in the kitchen, the real Edward, Earl of Warwick, was locked in the Tower of London. He'd been imprisoned since he was 10 years old, arrested by Henry immediately after Bosworth Field. His crime? Existing. Edward, Earl of Warwick, is the nephew of both Edward IV and Richard III. His claim to the throne is better than Henry's. Much better. And Henry knows it. So Edward lives in a cell. Year after year. He's not charged with treason. He hasn't plotted rebellion. He's just a boy, then a teenager, then a young man locked away because of his bloodline. In 1499, the same year Perkin Warbeck was executed, Henry decides Edward has lived long enough. He's charged with conspiring with Warbeck, a confession almost certainly extracted under torture. The evidence is thin. It doesn't matter. Edward, Earl of Warwick, is beheaded on Tower Hill on November 28, 1499. He's 24 years old. He spent half his life in prison for the crime of being born. But Edward isn't the only one. Other Plantagenet relatives vanish. Some die in prison under mysterious circumstances. Some are quietly executed. Some simply disappear from the historical record. Henry VII systematically eliminates anyone with a drop of royal blood that isn't his own. By the time he's finished the Plantagenet line, the dynasty that ruled England for over 300 years, is nearly extinct. Henry VII died on April 21, 1509. He's 52 years old. He's ruled for 24 years. The chroniclers praise him. They call him a peacemaker, a shrewd administrator. The king who ended the Wars of the Roses and brought stability to England. They're not entirely wrong. He did bring stability, but they don't mention the cost. Over 50 documented executions of nobles and potential rivals. Thousands more imprisoned, bankrupted, or destroyed. An entire nation trained to fear its own government. Legal precedents that strip away centuries of common law protections. Henry VII didn't just secure his throne. He built a machine. A system that concentrates absolute power in the monarch's hands. A framework that makes tyranny not just possible but routine. And he's handing that machine to his 17-year-old son, Henry VIII. The boy who will use his father's tools to build a mountain of corpses so high that historians are still counting them 500 years later. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're barely scratching the surface, and already you're seeing the lies they taught you in school. Henry VII, the wise peacemaker? No. He was a paranoid tyrant who perfected the art of state terror. If you want the full, unfiltered truth about history's most brutal rulers, subscribe to Throne of Lies. Don't let these stories disappear again. Edward, Earl of Warwick, died in prison at 24 for nothing more than his bloodline. Lambert Simnel was 10 years old when he was turned into a propaganda tool. Perkin Warbeck, whoever he really was, died swearing his identity to the end. Their stories matter. The truth matters. April 21, 1509. Henry VII is dead. His son, also named Henry, becomes King of England at 17 years old. And for the first time in decades, England exhales. The old tyrant is gone. The new king is young, handsome, athletic, and brilliant. He speaks 4 languages fluently. He composes music. He writes poetry. He can debate theology with scholars and joust with the finest knights in Europe. Contemporary accounts describe him as the most attractive monarch in Christendom. Over 6 feet tall, muscular, with auburn hair and a charm that makes ambassadors stumble over their words. This is the Renaissance prince, the golden boy, the king England has been waiting for. For 18 years, Henry VIII is everything his father wasn't. He throws lavish parties. He commissions art and music. He builds palaces. He's married to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess, and by all accounts, he loves her. They have a daughter, Mary. The kingdom is prosperous, cultural, civilized. Then, January 24, 1536, a jousting tournament at Greenwich Palace. Henry VIII is 44 years old now, heavier than in his youth but still competing. He's charging down the tilt yard, lance lowered, when his horse stumbles. 2 tons of horse and armored rider crash to the ground. Henry is pinned underneath, unconscious, his helmet crushing against his skull. He's out for 2 hours. When he wakes, something is different. His personality begins to shift. The charm fades. The patience evaporates. He becomes suspicious, paranoid, prone to rage. His headaches are constant. His mood swings are violent and unpredictable. Modern medical experts believe Henry VIII suffered a traumatic brain injury that day. Damage to the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that controls impulse, judgment, empathy. The part that makes you human. Add to that the ulcer on his left leg. It started years earlier, probably from a jousting injury, and it never healed. By the late 1530s, it's massive, weeping, infected, giving off a stench so foul that courtiers can smell him coming down the hallway. The pain is excruciating, constant, maddening. His weight balloons. At his death, he'll be estimated at nearly 400 pounds, with a 54-inch waist. Moving is agony. He's carried in a chair, hoisted by machinery. His body is failing him piece by piece, year by year. Chronic pain changes people. Brain damage changes people. And when the person in question has absolute power over an entire kingdom, everyone suffers. But the transformation didn't happen overnight. It was already beginning before the accident. Because in 1527, 9 years earlier, Henry VIII decided he wanted something he couldn't have. A divorce. Catherine of Aragon has been Henry's wife for 18 years. She's given him 6 children. 5 are dead. Only their daughter Mary survives. And Henry needs a son. Desperately. Without a male heir, England could collapse back into civil war after his death. But there's another reason Henry wants to end the marriage. Her name is Anne Boleyn, and is the daughter of a minor nobleman. She's not conventionally beautiful by the standards of the time. Dark-haired, dark-eyed, sharp-featured. But she's intelligent, witty, educated in the French court. And Henry is obsessed with her. The problem? The Pope won't grant Henry a divorce. Catherine of Aragon is the aunt of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, the most powerful man in Europe. The Pope isn't about to anger him by annulling his aunt's marriage. So Henry does the unthinkable. He breaks with Rome. He establishes himself as the supreme head of the Church of England. He tears his entire kingdom away from 1,000 years of Catholic tradition, all to Mary and Boleyn. In 1533, he succeeds. Catherine is divorced, stripped of her title, isolated in a series of cold, drafty castles. She's forbidden from seeing her daughter Mary. She died in 1536, alone and abandoned, at the age of 50. There's evidence suggesting she was poisoned, though it's never been proven. Henry marries Anne Boleyn. She's crowned Queen of England. For a brief moment, she has everything. Then she gives birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, not the son Henry needs. She becomes pregnant again. Miscarries. Pregnant again. Another miscarriage. On the day Catherine of Aragon is buried, January 29, 1536, and miscarries what appears to be a male fetus. Henry is watching the funeral procession. When he's told about the miscarriage, he turns to Anne coldly and says, "I see that God will not give me male children." For months later, Anne Boleyn is arrested. The charges are spectacular. Adultery with 5 men, including her own brother. Plotting to murder the king. Witchcraft. The evidence? Confessions extracted under torture. Witness testimony from people who would be executed if they didn't cooperate. Circumstantial accusations of glances and conversations twisted into treason. It's all fabricated. Every word. Henry wants Anne gone so he can marry Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting. And he's willing to destroy Anne completely to get what he wants. On May 15, 1536, Anne Boleyn is put on trial. The verdict is decided before the trial begins. Guilty. The sentence? Death by burning or beheading, at the king's pleasure. Henry, in a moment of twisted mercy, decides on beheading. But not by axe, and requested a swordsman, and Henry agreed. He imports an expert swordsman from Calais, France. The man is paid £23, a huge sum. His sword is specially designed. Sharp, light, swift. May 19, 1536. Tower Green. 8 in the morning. And Boleyn walks to the scaffold. She's wearing a grey damask gown trimmed with fur, a red petticoat underneath. Her hair is pinned up beneath a white coif. She's calm, composed. She addresses the crowd. "Good Christian people, I am come here to die according to law, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I come here only to die, and thus to yield myself humbly to the will of the king, my lord. And if, in my life, I did ever offend the king's grace, Surely with my death I do now atone. She kneels. She prays briefly. The swordsman approaches from behind. A mercy, so she won't see the blade coming. In one motion her head is severed. It falls. Blood sprays across the straw. Her lips are said to have continued moving for several seconds after. Prayer, perhaps, or just the final electrical impulses of a dying brain. And Boleyn's body and head are shoved into an old arrow chest because no one bothered to prepare a proper coffin. She's buried in an unmarked grave in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower. She was Queen of England for 3 years. She was 35 years old. She was innocent. The next day, the very next day, Henry VIII becomes engaged to Jane Seymour. They marry 11 days after Anne's execution. Jane gives Henry what he's always wanted. A son. Edward. Born October 12, 1537. But 12 days later, Jane Seymour dies of puerperal fever, an infection following childbirth. Some historians argue it was medical negligence. Others say it was simply the brutal reality of Tudor medicine. Either way, Jane Seymour is dead at 29, and Henry mourns her for the rest of his life. Not because he loved her more than the others, because she gave him a son. Henry waits 3 years before marrying again. His advisors arrange a political match with Anne of Cleves, a German princess. The problem? When Henry meets her in person, he finds her unattractive. He goes through with the marriage anyway in January 1540, but he never consummates it. 6 months later, he annuls the marriage. Anne of Cleves, unlike her predecessors, is smart. She agrees to everything Henry demands. She accepts a generous settlement, castles, land, money. She lives quietly in England for 17 more years and dies peacefully at age 41. She survives because she knows when to submit. But wife number 5 isn't so fortunate. Catherine Howard is Henry's 5th wife. She's a teenager, somewhere between 16 and 19 years old, when Henry marries her in July 1540. Henry is 49, morbidly obese, covered in festering sores, and he's utterly infatuated with her. Catherine is young, naive. Before her marriage, she was allegedly involved with Francis Derham, a secretary in her family's household. After her marriage, she's accused of adultery with Thomas Culpeper, a member of Henry's privy chamber. The evidence? Letters, meetings, whispers. Some of it may be true. Some of it may be manipulation by courtiers jockeying for power. Catherine herself claims that Culpeper pursued her, that she was trapped, that she had no choice. It doesn't matter. Henry feels humiliated, betrayed. And when Henry VIII feels betrayed, people die. Catherine Howard was arrested in November 1541. She's held at Hampton Court Palace while the investigation proceeds. According to legend, she broke free from her guards and ran down the gallery toward the chapel, where Henry was hearing mass. She pounded on the doors, screaming for mercy. Henry refused to see her. The guards dragged her back. That gallery is now known as the Haunted Gallery. Visitors report hearing screams echoing through it. Even today, Catherine Howard is taken to the Tower of London. On February 13, 1542, she's beheaded on Tower Green, the same scaffold where Anne Boleyn died. She's 17 years old, maybe 18. Records aren't clear. The night before her execution, she requests that the block be brought to her cell. She practices laying her head on it over and over so she won't fumble when the moment comes. Thomas Culpeper and Francis Derham were executed days earlier. Culpeper is beheaded, a mercy because of his status. Derham is hanged, drawn, and quartered. His screams echo across Tyburn as he's disemboweled while still alive. Henry's final wife, Catherine Parr, is the luckiest of all. She married him in July 1543. She's a widow, intelligent, pious, and careful. She manages to survive Henry's paranoia by never challenging him, never contradicting him, and outliving him. But she nearly didn't make it. In 1546, Henry's advisors convince him that Catherine is a Protestant heretic. A warrant is issued for her arrest. Catherine finds out and rushes to Henry, weeping, submitting completely, claiming any religious discussions were only to distract him from his pain. Henry forgives her. The warrant is forgotten. Catherine Parr survives because Henry VIII dies before he can turn on her. She's 41 when he died in 1547. 6 wives. 2 executed. 2 divorced. 1 dead in childbirth. 1 survived. That's Henry VIII's legacy in marriage. But the wives are only part of the story. In 1534, the same year Henry declares himself supreme head of the Church of England, he faces a problem. The Catholic Church owns vast amounts of property in England. Monasteries, abbeys, priories, they control roughly a quarter of all cultivated land. They're wealthy, powerful, and they answer to Rome, not to Henry. Henry's solution? Destroy them all. Between 1536 and 1541, over 800 monasteries, abbeys, nunneries, and friaries were dissolved. That's a neutral term, isn't it? Dissolved. It sounds administrative, bureaucratic. Here's what it actually means. Armed men arrive at religious houses. They evict the inhabitants. Monks, nuns, friars who have lived there for decades. They strip the buildings of anything valuable. Gold, silver, jewels, manuscripts, land deeds. Then they tear the buildings apart. Stone by stone. Roof tiles sold. Lead melted down. Ancient libraries burned or discarded. Approximately 15,000 religious men and women are displaced. Some are given small pensions. Most are left with nothing. No homes. No livelihood. No community. Many die of starvation or disease in the following years. But the human cost is just beginning. In October 1536, the people of northern England have had enough. They rise in rebellion, 40,000 of them, drawn from Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Durham, and beyond. They call it the Pilgrimage of Grace. They march peacefully, carrying banners depicting the 5 wounds of Christ. They're not trying to overthrow Henry. They just want their monasteries back. They want their religion restored. They want their communities whole again. Their leader is a lawyer named Robert Aske. He's educated, charismatic, and he manages to hold this massive rebellion together through negotiation and faith. The rebels occupy York. They take castles. They have the numbers and organization to threaten Henry's entire regime. Henry panics. He can't defeat 40,000 rebels with the forces he has available. So he does what he does best. He lies. Henry sends representatives north. They promise pardons. They promise to consider the rebels' grievances. They promise a parliament will be held in York to discuss reforms. Robert Aske, trusting the king's word, convinces the rebels to go home peacefully. It's a trap. As soon as the rebels disperse, Henry orders mass arrests. Robert Aske is seized, taken to London, convicted of treason, and sentenced to death. His execution is designed to send a message. July 1537. York. Robert Aske is hanged in chains from the walls of York Castle. Not hanged until dead, hanged until nearly dead, then left to hang there alive in the chains. He dies slowly over days, exposed to the elements, starving, dehydrating in agony, while the people of York are forced to watch. His body is left hanging for months as a warning. But Aske isn't the only victim. Henry orders the execution of 178 rebellion leaders. They're hanged in public squares across the north. Their bodies are displayed in towns and villages. Some are drawn and quartered, cut down while still alive, disemboweled, their intestines burned in front of them, then beheaded and chopped into pieces. Entire villages are punished, property seized, families destroyed. The message is clear. Resist the king, and everyone you know will suffer. The pilgrimage of grace is crushed. The monasteries stay dissolved. But the loss isn't just religious or political. It's cultural. Medieval monasteries were centers of learning. They preserved manuscripts dating back centuries. Texts on medicine, philosophy, history, science, literature. When Henry's men burn or discard these libraries, they're destroying knowledge that can never be recovered. Works of art, illuminated manuscripts, ancient records, gone. Monasteries were also social safety nets. They ran hospitals. They provided charity to the poor. They offered education to children. They brewed beer, baked bread, and distributed food during famines. When the monasteries disappear, so do those services. The poor starve. The sick die untreated. Communities that relied on monastic support for generations collapse. Henry sells the confiscated land to nobles and merchants at cut-rate prices, creating a new class of wealthy landowners loyal to him. He pockets the rest, an estimated £1.3 million, roughly £500 million in today's money. It's theft on a national scale, and it's carried out with ruthless efficiency. But here's what really makes Henry VIII's reign horrifying. The monasteries, the wives, the rebellions, those are just the famous atrocities. The ones that make it into history books. The everyday terror is worse. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister from 1532 to 1540, builds an intelligence network that would make a modern surveillance state jealous. Spies and informants are everywhere. In taverns, in markets, in churches, in noble households. One wrong word about the king can get you arrested. A joke, a rumor, an overheard complaint. In 1534, Henry pushes through the Treasons Act. It's one of the broadest treason laws in English history. Under this law, it's treason to call the king a heretic, a tyrant, or a usurper, even in private conversation. It's treason to deny any of the king's titles. It's treason to wish harm upon the king, even in thought. The penalty for treason? Death. Always death. And the methods of execution are designed to maximize suffering. Hanging, drawing, and quartering for men. You're hanged by the neck until nearly dead, then cut down. While you're still conscious, they slice open your abdomen and pull out your intestines. They burn them in front of you. Then they cut off your genitals. Then they behead you. Finally, they chop your body into 4 pieces, the quartering, and display the pieces in public locations. Burning at the stake for heretics, you're tied to a wooden post. Bundles of wood are stacked around you. They light the fire. If you're lucky, the smoke suffocates you before the flames reach you. If you're not, you burn alive. The smell of burning human flesh carries for miles. And then there's boiling alive. Yes, really. In 1531, Henry passes a law making poisoning a crime punishable by boiling. A cook named Richard Roose is accused of poisoning his master's household. 17 people sick, 2 dead. Roose is chained inside a massive cauldron of water at Smithfield. The fire is lit beneath it. He's boiled to death in front of a crowd. The screams are unimaginable. These aren't rare occurrences. They're routine. In 1535, Thomas More, the former Lord Chancellor and one of the most respected intellectuals in Europe, was executed. His crime? Refusing to take the oath of supremacy, which would recognize Henry as the head of the church. More doesn't lead a rebellion. He doesn't plot against Henry. He simply stays silent on the matter, and that's enough. He's beheaded on Tower Hill. His head is boiled to preserve it, then displayed on London Bridge for a month. His daughter eventually bribes the guards to retrieve it. Then there's Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury. She's 67 years old, from the old Plantagenet line, one of the last survivors. Her sons oppose Henry's religious reforms. That's enough to condemn her. In 1541, Margaret is told she's to be executed. She refuses to lay her head on the block. "I am no traitor," she declares. She runs. The executioner chases her around the scaffold, hacking at her with the axe. Takes 11 blows. 11. She dies slowly, messily, in front of a horrified crowd. She's 67 years old. Historians estimate that between 57,000 and 72,000 people were executed during Henry VIII's 38-year reign. That's nearly 2,000 executions per year. 5 per day on average. Some were nobles. Most were ordinary people. Farmers accused of speaking against the king. Priests who refused to abandon Rome. Women accused of witchcraft or adultery. Men who couldn't pay their taxes. People in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught in the machinery of terror that Henry VII built and Henry VIII perfected. By the time Henry VIII died in January 1547, England was traumatized, brutalized, broken, And the worst part? He dies peacefully, in his bed, surrounded by advisors, convinced he's done God's work. Thousands died screaming, and their stories were erased from comfortable history books. They don't teach you about Margaret Pole being hacked to death at 67. They don't tell you about Robert Aske hanging in chains for weeks. They don't mention the 40,000 people of the Pilgrimage of Grace who trusted their king and were slaughtered for it. If you believe the truth matters more than comfortable lies, hit that subscribe button. The dead deserve to have their stories told honestly. Catherine Howard was a teenager, likely groomed and abused, and she died practicing how to lay her head on the block. And Boleyn was innocent, and her lips kept moving after her head was severed. These aren't just statistics, they're people, and their suffering deserves to be remembered. January 28, 1547. Hampton Court Palace. Henry VIII is dead. His body is so bloated and decayed that it takes 16 men to carry his coffin. As they transport it to Windsor Castle, the coffin splits open. Fluids leak onto the floor. Dogs come to lick up the remains. It's a fitting end for a monster. But the machine he built doesn't die with him. Passed to his son. Edward VI is 9 years old when he becomes King of England. 9. He's small for his age, pale, fragile. His mother, Jane Seymour, died 12 days after giving birth to him. He's never known her. He's been raised by Tudors, kept away from his half-sisters Mary and Elizabeth, groomed from infancy to be the perfect Protestant prince. And here's the problem. Edward is a true believer. He's not cynical like his father. He doesn't see religion as a political tool. He genuinely believes that Catholicism is evil, that the Pope is the Antichrist, that England must be purified of all traces of the old faith, no matter the cost. At 9 years old, Edward VI has the theological certainty of a fanatic. But he's a child. He can't rule alone. So England is actually controlled by a council of regents, nobles who use the boy king as a puppet to advance their own power. First comes Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, Edward's uncle. He's named Lord Protector. For 2 years, he ruled England in Edward's name, pushing radical Protestant reforms. Catholic masses are banned. Priests are forced to marry. Church decorations, statues, paintings, stained glass windows that took craftsmen generations to create, are destroyed. They call it purification, this cultural annihilation. Then, in 1549, Seymour is overthrown in a coup by John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. Seymour is eventually executed for treason in 1552, beheaded on Tower Hill, just another corpse in the Tudor machine. Dudley takes control, and under his influence, Edward's religious fervor intensifies. Catholic churches are stripped bare. Gold and silver church vessels are melted down. Ancient manuscripts are burned. Stained glass windows depicting biblical scenes are smashed. Frescoes are whitewashed over. Statues of saints are toppled and destroyed. The cathedrals that took centuries to build are gutted in months. And anyone who resists, they're arrested, imprisoned, in some cases executed. The Catholic Mass is now illegal. Priests who perform it face death. Families caught worshipping in the old way are torn apart. Mary, Edward's half-sister, is a devout Catholic. She refuses to convert. Edward, this 9-year-old, then 10, then 11-year-old boy, writes her furious letters demanding she abandon her faith. He calls her a traitor to God. He threatens her with punishment. He's 11 years old, and he's threatening his own sister. But Edward's body is failing him. By 1552, he's constantly sick, coughing, feverish, losing weight. He has tuberculosis, though they don't know it yet. By early 1553, he's dying. And this is where it gets truly vicious. Edward knows that if he dies, the crown passes to Mary under Henry VIII succession laws. Mary, the Catholic, the woman who will undo everything he's accomplished. The thought horrifies him. So Edward, at 15 years old, dying of tuberculosis, tries to steal his sister's throne. He writes a new succession document called My Devise for the Succession. He removes both Mary and Elizabeth from the line of succession, declaring them illegitimate, and names Lady Jane Grey, his Protestant cousin, as his heir. Lady Jane Grey is 16 years old. She's brilliant, pious, and she doesn't want the crown. But John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, sees an opportunity. His son is married to Jane. If she becomes queen, Dudley controls England. Edward signs the document. Days later, on July 6, 1553, he died. He's 15 years old. His body is so ravaged by disease that some accounts describe him coughing up black sputum mixed with pieces of his own lungs. Lady Jane Grey is proclaimed queen. She's terrified. She begs not to be crowned. It doesn't matter. For 9 days, she's Queen of England. 9 days. Then Mary rallies her supporters. She marches on London with an army. The people support her not because they love her, but because she's the legitimate heir. The council abandons Jane Grey. Northumberland's coup collapses. Jane Grey is arrested and taken to the Tower of London. Mary could spare her. Jane didn't want the throne. She was a pawn, manipulated by her family and Northumberland. She's 16 years old. But in 1554, after another Protestant rebellion, Mary decides Jane is too dangerous to live. On February 12, 1554, Jane Grey was beheaded on Tower Green. She's 17 years old. The executioner asks for her forgiveness. She grants it. She ties her own blindfold. She gropes for the block, disoriented, saying, "Where is it? What shall I do?" Someone guides her head to the wood. The axe falls. 17 years old. Guilty only of being born with royal blood. John Dudley is executed months earlier. Edward Seymour already dead. Edward VI, the boy king who wanted to purify England, leaves behind a trail of destruction and a kingdom on the edge of civil war. And now the crown passes to Mary. But to understand Mary, you have to go back. Back to when she was a child. Mary Tudor was born in 1516, the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. For the first 11 years of her life, she's a princess. Adored, educated, promised marriage to powerful European princes. Her mother is queen. Her father loves her. Then, in 1527, everything fell apart. Henry wants to divorce Catherine and marry Boleyn. Catherine refuses. She fights. And Mary watches as her mother is systematically destroyed. Stripped of her title. Exiled from court. Forbidden from seeing her daughter. Mary is 17 years old when Parliament declares her illegitimate. 17. One day, she's a princess, heir to the throne. The next, she's a bastard. Her title is taken. Her household is dissolved. Her friends are sent away. And then the real cruelty begins. Mary is forced to serve as a lady-in-waiting to her infant half-sister, Elizabeth, and Boleyn's daughter, the daughter of the woman who destroyed her mother. Mary has to bow to a baby, serve her meals, attend to her needs. It's psychological torture, and Henry knows it. Mary's mother, Catherine, is dying. She's isolated in a cold, damp castle, sick, abandoned. Mary writes letters begging to see her. Henry refuses. Every request is denied. Catherine of Aragon died in January 1536. Mary is not allowed to attend the funeral. She's 19 years old, and she can't say goodbye to her mother. For the next 11 years, Mary lives in constant fear. And Boleyn is executed. But that doesn't help Mary. New queens come and go. Mary is still illegitimate, still vulnerable, still powerless. Her father could execute her at any moment. He's executed everyone else who inconvenienced him. She watches as Henry destroys the Catholic Church she loves. She watches as monasteries burn. She watches as priests are hanged. And she can't do anything. She's trapped. In 1544, Henry finally restores Mary to the succession line, but only after his son Edward and daughter Elizabeth. She's 28 years old. She spent over a decade as a bastard, serving a father who destroyed her life. When Edward becomes king, Mary's situation worsens. Edward hates her Catholicism. He writes her angry letters. He tries to force her to convert. She refuses. For 6 years, she lives in fear that Edward's Protestant counselors will have her arrested. tried for heresy, burned at the stake. When Edward dies and Mary finally becomes queen at age 37, she's not just damaged. She's broken. Every trauma she's endured, her mother's destruction, her own humiliation, the loss of her faith community, the years of fear, it all comes flooding out. And when Mary breaks, England burns. Mary I became Queen of England in July 1553. Her first acts are merciful. She pardons many of Edward's Protestant counselors. She spares Jane Grey's life initially. She wants reconciliation. But the reconciliation never happens. Within months, Protestant preachers are denouncing her from their pulpits. Pamphlets circulate calling her a Spanish whore, a tyrant, a puppet of the Pope. In January 1554, Thomas Wyatt led a Protestant rebellion, marching on London with 3,000 men. They nearly succeed in overthrowing her. Mary crushes the rebellion. Wyatt is executed. Jane Grey is executed. And Mary's patience runs out. If the Protestants want war, she'll give them war. In February 1555, the burnings began. The first victim is John Rogers, a Protestant preacher. He's taken to Smithfield, a public square in London. A crowd gathers, thousands of people. Rogers is tied to a wooden stake. Bundles of wood are stacked around him. The fire is lit. Here's what they don't tell you about burning at the stake. It's not quick. If you're lucky, the smoke suffocates you before the flames reach you. But if the wind is wrong, if the wood is damp, if the fire doesn't build fast enough, you burn alive. Your skin blisters and blackens. Your fat melts. Your muscles contract, pulling your body into a fetal position. You scream until your lungs are seared. Can take 30 minutes to die. John Rogers burns for 20 minutes. His wife and 11 children watch from the crowd. Over the next 3 years, 280 more people will follow him. Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury under Henry VIII and Edward VI, is one of them. Cranmer is the man who annulled Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He's the architect of England's Protestant Reformation. And Mary wants him to suffer. Cranmer is arrested, tried, and convicted of heresy. But Mary doesn't burn him immediately. She forces him to watch as his friends, Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley, are burned at the stake in Oxford. October 16, 1555. Latimer and Ridley are tied to the same stake. The fire is lit. Ridley's brother tries to help by piling more wood on the flames, hoping to speed their deaths. Instead, the extra wood smothers the fire. It burns low and slow. Ridley screams, "I cannot burn. I cannot burn. For God's sake, let the fire come to me." It takes him 45 minutes to die. Latimer dies faster. As the flames rise, he shouts to Ridley, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle, by God's grace, in England, as I trust shall never be put out." Then the flames consume him. Cranmer watches it all. For months afterward, he's kept in prison, pressured to recant his Protestant faith. Finally, broken, he signs a recantation. He admits he was wrong. He submits to Rome. Mary decides to burn him anyway. March 21, 1556. Cranmer is taken to the stake in Oxford. At the last moment, he recants his recantation. He denounces the Pope. He thrusts his right hand, the hand that signed the recantation, into the flames first, saying, "This hand has offended." He burns to death holding his hand in the fire. But Cranmer and Rogers are famous. Most of Mary's victims aren't. Perrotin Massey is a pregnant woman from Guernsey. She's accused of heresy. She's burned at the stake in July 1556. As the flames rise, she goes into labor. The baby is born into the fire. Someone pulls the infant out. The bailiff orders the child thrown back into the flames. A newborn baby burns alive. That's not an isolated incident. Multiple pregnant women are burned during Mary's reign. The law doesn't care. Heresy is heresy. And the burnings are public. Intentionally public. Mary wants people to see what happens to heretics. Thousands gather at Smithfield to watch. Some cheer. Some weep. Some vomit from the smell of burning flesh. The burnings happen in London, in Oxford, in Canterbury, in small towns across England. 280 people over 5 years. That's more than one person burned alive every week. But here's the cruelest irony. Mary thinks she's doing God's work. She genuinely believes that by burning heretics, she's saving England's soul. She believes the pain is temporary but damnation is eternal. She's not a sadist. She's a true believer, shaped by trauma into something monstrous. And the trauma keeps compounding. In 1554, Mary marries Philip II of Spain. She's 38 years old. She's desperate for a child, a Catholic heir who will secure England's return to Rome. She becomes pregnant, or so she believes. Her belly swells. She feels movement. Physicians confirm the pregnancy. England prepares for the birth of a prince. Months pass. No baby comes. It's a phantom pregnancy, a psychological manifestation of her desperate need for a child. Her body, shaped by stress and trauma, mimics pregnancy. But there's no baby. It happens again in 1557. Another phantom pregnancy. Another humiliation. Mary is heartbroken. She believes God is punishing her. But for what? She's restored the Catholic faith. She's burned the heretics. What more does God want? By 1558, Mary is dying. She has ovarian cancer, though they don't know it. The pain is excruciating. She knows she's dying without an heir. She knows the crown will pass to Elizabeth, her Protestant half-sister, and Boleyn's daughter. Everything she's suffered for, everything she's done, the burnings, the pain, the blood, it's all for nothing. Mary I died on November 17, 1558. She's 42 years old. Her last words reportedly are about Calais, the last English possession in France, lost during her reign. But some accounts say she spoke of her mother, Catherine of Aragon, and the life that was stolen from her. She dies believing God has abandoned her. And here's where history lies to you. You know her as Bloody Mary. The name has stuck for 450 years. She's the Catholic tyrant, the monster who burned innocents, the villain of English history. But let's look at the numbers. Mary I, 280 executions in 5 years. Elizabeth I, her successor, over 400 executions in 45 years. Plus the thousands killed in Ireland. Plus the Catholic priests hunted and executed. Plus the economic policies that drove the poor into starvation. Why is Mary Bloody Mary, while Elizabeth is Good Queen Bess? Because Mary lost. History is written by the winners. And the winners were Protestant. In 1563, just 5 years after Mary's death, a Protestant propagandist named John Foxe published Foxe's Book of Martyrs. It's a massive tome documenting Protestant martyrs, including all of Mary's victims. It's graphic, detailed, horrifying, and it's incredibly one-sided. Foxe doesn't mention the Catholics executed under Edward VI. He doesn't mention the monasteries destroyed under Henry VIII. He doesn't mention the thousands killed in the Pilgrimage of Grace. He presents Mary's reign as uniquely evil, an aberration, proof that Catholicism is tyranny. The book became a bestseller. For generations, it's the second most read book in England after the Bible. It shapes English identity. It teaches Protestant children that Catholics are monsters. And Mary becomes Bloody Mary, the cautionary tale, the symbol of Catholic cruelty. But here's the truth. Mary was shaped by the same system that shaped her father and brother and sister. She was a product of Tudor tyranny. Her childhood was torture. Her adolescence was humiliation. Her adulthood was fear. She didn't invent religious persecution. Henry VIII and Edward VI pioneered it. She didn't invent public executions. They'd been standard for decades. She didn't even execute the most people. Elizabeth and Henry VIII both have higher body counts. Mary's crime, in the eyes of history, was being Catholic in a Protestant country. And losing. Does that excuse the burnings? Number 280 people died screaming in agony because of her religious fanaticism. Pregnant women burned. Children orphaned. Families destroyed. But understanding how she became a monster matters. Because Mary I wasn't born evil. She was made evil. By trauma. By a father who destroyed her mother and humiliated her. By a system that taught her that violence was the answer to dissent. The Tudors didn't just kill their enemies. They killed their own children's souls. Edward VI died at 15, a fanatic who tried to steal his sister's throne. Mary I died at 42, a broken woman who burned people alive in God's name. And now the crown passes to the last Tudor, Elizabeth I, the one they call the Golden Age. We'll see about that. November 17, 1558. Mary I is dead. Elizabeth Tudor becomes Queen of England at 25 years old. The crowd cheers. After 5 years of Mary's burnings, after decades of religious chaos, England wants stability, peace, a fresh start. Elizabeth promises them exactly that. What she delivers is 45 years of calculated ruthlessness that makes her father look impulsive and her sister look merciful. Because here's what you need to understand about Elizabeth I. She survived. While her mother was beheaded, while her brother tried to disinherit her, while her sister could have executed her at any moment, Elizabeth survived. And survival taught her one lesson above all others. Never show weakness. Never trust anyone. Never hesitate to kill. Elizabeth spends her entire reign walking a tightrope. She's a Protestant queen in a world full of Catholic monarchs who want her dead. The Pope excommunicates her in 1570, declaring that any Catholic who assassinates her will be doing God's work. Spain wants to invade. France wants to invade. Half her own nobles are Catholic and questionable in their loyalty. So Elizabeth builds a security apparatus that makes her father's network of spies look amateurish. Sir Francis Walsingham becomes her spy master. He runs agents across Europe. He intercepts letters. He plants informants in Catholic households. He tortures suspects. He fabricates evidence when necessary. And he's extraordinarily good at his job. Catholic priests are hunted like animals. It becomes illegal to harbor a Catholic priest. The penalty is death. It becomes illegal to attend a Catholic mass. The penalty is crippling fines or imprisonment. It becomes illegal to own Catholic books, Catholic rosaries, Catholic anything. Over 400 Catholics were executed during Elizabeth's reign. Many are priests hunted down and dragged to execution. The method? Hanging, drawing, and quartering. Edmund Campion, a Jesuit priest, was arrested in 1581. He's racked. His arms and legs stretched on the torture device until his joints dislocate. Then he's hanged until nearly dead, cut down, disemboweled while conscious, castrated, beheaded, and quartered. His body parts are displayed across London. His crime? Being a priest. Margaret Clitheroe, a housewife in York, is arrested in 1586 for harboring priests. She refuses to plead because if she pleads, her children will be forced to testify against her. So the court orders her pressed to death. They strip her naked, lay her on the ground, place a door on top of her, and pile rocks on the door. Slowly, over 15 minutes, the weight increases. Her ribs crack. Her lungs are crushed. She suffocates under 700 pounds of stone. She's 33 years old. She has 3 children. But Elizabeth's greatest act of calculated cruelty involves her own cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary is Elizabeth's cousin and, in the eyes of many Catholics, the rightful Queen of England. She's been Queen of Scotland since she was 6 days old. She's beautiful, charismatic, and politically incompetent. After a series of disastrous decisions, including possibly being involved in her husband's murder, she flees Scotland in 1568 and asks Elizabeth for protection. Elizabeth locks her up. For 19 years, Mary, Queen of Scots, was held in captivity. Not in a dungeon, in a series of manor houses under guard, comfortable but imprisoned. She's not charged with a crime. She's not on trial. She's just kept. Because Elizabeth can't let her go. If Mary is free, she becomes a rallying point for every Catholic in England and Europe. But Elizabeth also can't execute her, not without evidence of treason. So Elizabeth waits. Walsingham, the spymaster, manufactures the evidence. He plants agents around Mary. He intercepts her letters. In 1586, he uncovered the Babington Plot, a plan to assassinate Elizabeth and put Mary on the throne. Mary's letters seem to approve the plot. Whether Mary actually wrote those letters or whether Walsingham forged them is still debated by historians. It doesn't matter. Elizabeth has her excuse. Mary, Queen of Scots, is tried and convicted of treason. Elizabeth signed the death warrant in February 1587. February 8, 1587. Fotheringhay Castle. Mary is brought into the Great Hall. She's 44 years old. She's wearing a black gown over a red petticoat. Red, the color of Catholic martyrdom. She's calm, composed. She prays in Latin. The executioner asks for her forgiveness. She grants it. Mary lays her head on the block. The executioner swings. The axe misses her neck and hits the back of her head. She doesn't die. He swings again. This time the axe cuts into her neck but doesn't sever it. Mary is still alive, wounded, bleeding in agony. The executioner has to saw through the remaining sinews with the axe blade. Finally, her head comes free. The executioner lifts the head to show the crowd. "God save the Queen!" he shouts. Mary's head falls out of his hand. She'd been wearing a wig. Her real hair, gray and short, is left in his grip while her head rolls across the floor. Then movement. Something shifts under Mary's skirts. Her small dog, a Skye Terrier that had hidden itself in her clothing, emerges. It's covered in her blood. It lies down between her head and body and refuses to move. They have to drag the dog away. Elizabeth claims she never meant for Mary to be executed, that the warrant was sent without her knowledge. It's a lie. Elizabeth signs every execution warrant personally. She knew exactly what she was doing. Mary, Queen of Scots, dies because she's a threat. Not because she's guilty, because she exists. But Catholics aren't Elizabeth's only targets. In 1547, under Edward VI, Parliament passed the Vagrancy Act. Elizabeth expands it. Under her reign, being homeless becomes a crime punishable by branding, enslavement, or death. First offense: you're whipped and a hole is burned through your ear with a hot iron. Second offense: you're branded with a V for vagabond on your forehead and sold into slavery for 2 years. Third offense: death. Hanged as an incorrigible criminal. Thousands are arrested. Thousands are branded. Hundreds are executed, not for stealing, not for violence, for being poor. But Elizabeth's greatest atrocity isn't in England. It's in Ireland. The Irish have been resisting English rule for centuries. Under Elizabeth, that resistance intensifies. The Desmond Rebellions, 2 massive uprisings in 1569 to 1573 and 1579 to 1583, threaten English control of Southern Ireland. Elizabeth's response is total war. She sends commanders with explicit orders: destroy the Irish capacity to resist, burn their crops, kill their livestock, raze their villages, make the land uninhabitable. They follow orders. English soldiers sweep through Munster, the southern province of Ireland. They burn fields of wheat and oats. They slaughter cattle and sheep. They destroy grain stores. They salt the earth so nothing will grow. Then they wait for winter. Famine hits. The Irish starve. Not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands. Edmund Spenser, yes, the same Edmund Spenser who wrote The Faerie Queene, one of the most celebrated poems in English literature, is living in Ireland during this period. He's been given confiscated Irish land as payment for his service to the crown. In his political tract, A View of the Present State of Ireland, Spenser describes what he sees. Out of every corner of the woods and glens, they came creeping forth upon their hands, for their legs could not bear them. They looked like anatomies of death. They spoke like ghosts crying out of their graves. They did eat the dead carrions, happy where they could find them. Yeah, and one another soon after, insomuch as the very carcasses they spared not to scrape out of their graves. Read that again. Irish people were so starved that they were eating corpses, digging up graves, committing cannibalism to survive. Spenser witnessed this, and his recommendation? Continue the policy. Starve them into submission. The death toll is estimated at over 30,000 people. Some historians put it higher, but the famine is only part of the horror. In November 1580, a force of 600 Spanish and Italian soldiers lands at Smerwick, on the coast of Ireland, to support the Irish rebellion. They fortify a position and wait for English forces. The English army, commanded by Lord Grey de Wilton, surrounds them. After 3 days of bombardment, the Spanish and Italians surrender. They're promised safe passage if they lay down their weapons. They lay down their weapons. Lord Grey orders them all executed. 600 men are massacred, unarmed, surrendered. Some are beheaded. Some are hanged. Some are simply hacked to death with swords. Takes hours to kill them all. One of the English officers overseeing the massacre is a young captain named Walter Raleigh. Yes, the same Walter Raleigh who introduced tobacco and potatoes to England. The same Walter Raleigh celebrated as an explorer and poet. He's there, watching, maybe participating. 600 men slaughtered in cold blood. But massacres and famine aren't enough for Elizabeth. She wants Ireland pacified permanently, so she implements the plantation policy. Here's how it works. Confiscate Irish land. Give it to English and Scottish settlers. Force the Irish off their ancestral territory. If they resist, kill them. It's ethnic cleansing. Systematic. Organized. State-sponsored. Entire Irish clans are displaced. Their lands are given to English landlords. Irish Catholics are forbidden from owning land in many areas. Irish language and culture are suppressed. English law is imposed. By the end of Elizabeth's reign, Ireland is a colony, a conquered territory. The Irish are subjects, not citizens, second-class people in their own homeland. And this is the queen they call Good Queen Bess, the Virgin Queen, the architect of England's golden age. But even Elizabeth's iron control begins to crack in her final years. Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, is Elizabeth's last favorite. He's young, handsome, ambitious, everything Elizabeth once was. She promotes him, trusts him, possibly even loves him. He's given command of military campaigns. He's showered with wealth and titles. But Essex is arrogant, reckless. In 1599, Elizabeth sent him to Ireland to crush another rebellion. He fails. He makes an unauthorized truce with the Irish rebels and abandons his post to return to England without permission. He bursts into Elizabeth's private chambers at Nonsuch Palace before she's dressed. He finds her without her wig, without her makeup, without the carefully constructed image she's maintained for 40 years. She's 66 years old. Her face is lined and scarred from a childhood bout of smallpox. Her hair is thin and gray. The Virgin Queen looks like the old woman she is. Essex sees the truth behind the mask. And Elizabeth never forgives him. She strips him of his offices, his income, his position at court. Essex, desperate and enraged, does the unthinkable. In February 1601, he attempts a coup. He marches into London with 300 armed followers, expecting the people to rally to him. No one does. The rebellion collapses within hours. Essex is arrested. His trial is swift. He's convicted of treason. On February 25, 1601, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, is beheaded in the Tower of London. He's 34 years old. But Elizabeth doesn't stop there. Essex's co-conspirators are rounded up. Some are executed. Others are racked. Their bodies stretched on the torture device until joints dislocate and muscles tear. Confessions are extracted. More arrests follow. And Elizabeth changes. Her paranoia deepens. She trusts no one. She rages at her counselors. She refuses to name an heir, even as she's clearly dying, because naming an heir means admitting she's mortal. She stops bathing regularly. She piles on makeup, thick white lead paint that poisons her skin. She wears elaborate wigs to hide her baldness. She dresses in younger women's fashions, trying to maintain the illusion of youth. Her teeth rot and fall out. Her breath is foul. Courtiers avoid standing too close. By 1603, Elizabeth is 70 years old. She's outlived everyone. Her siblings, her rivals, her lovers, her enemies. She's been Queen of England for 45 years. She's survived assassination plots, invasion attempts, rebellions, and political intrigues that would have destroyed lesser rulers. But survival came at a cost. She dies alone, bitter, paranoid, refusing to go to bed because she believes if she lies down, she'll never get up again. She dies standing, leaning against cushions, too stubborn to admit weakness even at the very end. Elizabeth I died on March 24, 1603. The Tudor dynasty dies with her. But let's talk about the golden age that Elizabeth supposedly created. The Elizabethan era. Shakespeare's plays, exploration and discovery. England rising as a world power. That's the story you've been told. That's the mythology. Here's the reality. The enclosure movement, the process of wealthy landowners seizing common land and converting it to private pasture, accelerates under Elizabeth. Peasants who have farmed the same land for generations are evicted. Villages are destroyed. Thousands of families are made homeless. Where do they go? Nowhere. They become vagrants. And vagrancy, as we've discussed, is a crime. By the 1590s, England had a vagrancy crisis. Tens of thousands of homeless people wandering the roads, begging, starving. Elizabeth's solution isn't welfare. It's criminalization. The death penalty applies to theft of anything worth more than 1 shilling. 1 shilling. That's roughly £30 in today's money. Steal a loaf of bread worth more than a shilling? Hanged. Children as young as 7 are executed for theft. And while the poor starve, the rich grow richer. Elizabeth grants monopolies to her favorites, exclusive rights to trade in certain goods. Sir Walter Raleigh gets the monopoly on wine. Others get monopolies on salt, coal, and playing cards. These monopolies drive up prices, making essential goods unaffordable for ordinary people. The gap between rich and poor becomes a chasm. And let's talk about child labor. The early manufacturing industries, textile production, mining, metalworking rely on children. Small hands for small tasks. Children as young as 5 work 12-hour days in dangerous conditions. Accidents are common. Deaths are common. No one cares. Children are cheap labor. This is the golden age. Shakespeare's plays performed for the wealthy while children die in coal mines. Exploration and colonization built on genocide in Ireland. A queen celebrated for her strength ruling through terror and starvation. The glamour is a lie. The glory is built on suffering. And the cost is counted in corpses. For 4 generations, the Tudors built their glory on mountains of corpses. Henry VII executed children for their bloodline. Henry VIII executed over 57,000 people in 38 years. Edward VI destroyed centuries of cultural heritage. Mary I burned 280 people alive. Elizabeth I killed over 400 Catholics, starved 30,000 Irish, and criminalized poverty. And history calls this progress. Calls it the dawn of modern England. Calls it a golden age. School doesn't teach you this. Netflix doesn't show you this. We do. Throne of Lies exists to drag these truths into the light, but we can't do it without you. Subscribe now, because if we don't tell these stories, who will? Mary, Queen of Scots, had her head sawed off with an axe while her dog hid in her skirts. Margaret Clitheroe was crushed to death under 700 pounds of stone. 600 surrendered soldiers were massacred at Smerwick. 30,000 Irish starved because English soldiers burned their crops. The dead are counting on us. They deserve to have their stories told honestly, not sanitized, not romanticized. The truth. It's time for the truth. 118 years. 5 monarchs. 1 dynasty. Let's count the bodies. Henry VII. Documented executions of over 50 nobles and rivals. Thousands more imprisoned, bankrupted, disappeared. The exact number? We'll never know. Records were destroyed. Deaths were covered up. But historians estimate at least several thousand died directly or indirectly from his policies. Henry VIII. Between 57,000 and 72,000 executions over 38 years. That's the conservative estimate. It doesn't count the 15,000 monks, nuns, and friars displaced during the dissolution, many of whom died of starvation or disease. It doesn't count the villages destroyed, the families shattered. Edward VI, 6 years of religious purges. Exact numbers are impossible, but hundreds executed. Thousands more traumatized by the destruction of their churches, their communities, their heritage. Mary I, 280 burned at the stake. A small number compared to her father and siblings, but each death was deliberate, public, agonizing. Elizabeth I, over 400 Catholics executed. 30,000 Irish died from famine and violence. Thousands of poor people branded, enslaved, or hanged for vagrancy. Add it all together, 100,000 dead. Minimum. That's a conservative estimate. The real number is almost certainly higher. 100,000 people dead because 5 people on a throne decided their lives didn't matter. Now, here's the question you might be asking. Was this unusual for the time? Were the Tudors uniquely brutal, or was this just how monarchy worked in the 16th century? Fair question. Let's compare. France, under the same period, saw the wars of religion brutal, yes, but largely driven by civil war, not centralized state terror. Spain had the Inquisition, which executed thousands, but over centuries, not decades. The Holy Roman Empire was fragmented, local princes had power, but no single authority could orchestrate the scale of killing that Henry VIII achieved. The Tudors weren't just participating in the violence of their era. They were innovating. They built systems, infrastructure, legal frameworks that made mass execution routine. They used propaganda to justify atrocities. They created a cult of personality around the monarchy that made questioning the crown equivalent to questioning God. They perfected tyranny. And then they wrote the history books. Because here's what the Tudors understood better than almost any dynasty before them. Control the narrative and you control history. Tudor portraits show you regal figures in jewels and furs. They're painted in idealized forms. Strong, handsome, beautiful. Henry VIII in his prime, broad-shouldered and commanding. Elizabeth I eternally youthful, draped in pearls. Those portraits are lies. Propaganda. Henry VIII at his death was a rotting, obese invalid who smelled of festering wounds. Elizabeth I at 70 was a paranoid, decaying woman who refused to bathe. But the portraits remain. They hang in museums. They shape how we see them. The golden age of Elizabeth. The Renaissance prince Henry VIII. The end of the Wars of the Roses. The birth of the Church of England. The foundation of the British Empire. That's the narrative they built. And it stuck. School textbooks teach you about Henry VIII's 6 wives like it's a romantic drama. They don't mention that 2 were executed, 1 was probably poisoned, 1 died from medical negligence, and the survivors lived in fear. They teach you about Elizabeth I defeating the Spanish Armada. They don't mention the 30,000 Irish who starved to death or the 600 soldiers massacred after surrendering. They teach you about the English Renaissance. They don't mention the 100,000 corpses it was built on. History has been sanitized, made palatable, turned into costume dramas and romantic fantasies. And that's exactly what the Tudors wanted. You might think this is just history, old atrocities from 500 years ago. What does it matter now? It matters because the patterns repeat. Authoritarian power always operates the same way. First, consolidate control. Eliminate rivals. Build legal structures that concentrate power. Create courts that serve the ruler, not justice. Second, manufacture fear. Make examples of dissenters. Ensure everyone knows that challenging authority means death. Use public executions. Make suffering visible. Third, control information. Build propaganda machines. Rewrite history. Make the tyrant look like a hero. Make the victims look like they deserved it. Fourth, normalize the violence. Make it routine. Make it legal. Make it boring. When executions happen every day, people stop noticing. When laws criminalize existence, people accept it. The Tudors mastered all 4 steps, and their blueprint has been copied by every authoritarian regime since. Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Pol Pot, modern dictatorships across the globe. The tactics are the same. The scale changes. The technology evolves. But the pattern is identical. And here's the uncomfortable truth. We still celebrate some of these monsters. We put Henry VIII on television. We make Elizabeth I into a feminist icon. We tour the Tower of London and take selfies where people were tortured to death. We sanitize history because comfortable lies are easier than uncomfortable truths. But comfortable lies serve power structures. They teach us that greatness and violence are compatible. That you can be a visionary and a mass murderer. That atrocities are acceptable if they're committed by the right people for the right reasons. That's how tyranny survives. Not through active support, but through passive acceptance. Through the sanitization of history. Through the transformation of monsters into myths. Understanding that matters. Recognizing the pattern matters. Because if you can't identify tyranny in the past, you won't recognize it in the present. The Tower of London sits on the Thames. Today, it's one of London's top tourist attractions. Over 3 million people visit every year. They walk through the halls. They look at the crown jewels. They take pictures. Most of them don't think about the screams. And Boleyn was beheaded on Tower Green. Catherine Howard was beheaded on Tower Green. Lady Jane Grey was beheaded on Tower Green. Margaret Pole was hacked to death on Tower Hill, just outside the walls. Thomas More was beheaded on Tower Hill. Edmund Campion was racked in the Tower's torture chambers. Thousands more were imprisoned there, tortured there, broken there. It's a monument to suffering. And we've turned it into entertainment. The Tudor portraits hang in galleries. Henry VIII glares from the walls of Hampton Court. Elizabeth I stares from 1,000 reproductions. They're icons. Symbols of English history and pride. But look at those portraits closely. Look at Henry's eyes. Look at Elizabeth's expression. They're not warm. They're not kind. They're calculating. Cold. These are people who killed without hesitation. Who destroyed lives to maintain power. Who built their legacies on mountains of corpses. The portraits are beautiful lies covering ugly truths. And that's why Throne of Lies exists. We're not here to entertain you with comfortable narratives. We're not here to celebrate greatness without acknowledging the cost. We're here to tell you what really happened. To drag the truth into the light, no matter how ugly it is. Because the dead deserve better than to be forgotten. And Boleyn deserves better than to be a punchline in a rhyme about Henry's wives. Margaret Pole deserves better than to be a footnote. The 30,000 Irish who starved deserve better than to be erased from Elizabeth's golden age. They were people. They suffered. They died screaming. And their suffering matters. History is not a fairy tale. It's a horror story. And if we don't tell it honestly, we're complicit in the lies. So here's what we're asking you to do. Subscribe to Throne of Lies. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Share these videos. Spread these stories. Fight against the sanitization of history. And tell us, which monarch do you want us to expose next? Leave a comment. Let us know. Because there are plenty more monsters wearing crowns throughout history, and we're just getting started. The throne was built on lies. We're here to burn it down. The Tower of London still stands. The portraits still hang. The myths still persist. But the truth is coming for them. And the truth doesn't care about crowns.